Hi everyone, my name is Mila Valdivia, and today I'll be talking about the life and legacy of Phillis Wheatley. First, the timeline of her life. Phillis was born in West Africa in 1753 and was captured and taken onto a slave ship to America just 8 years later. She did not know how to read or write and was just a child. She arrived in Boston, Massachusetts at 1761 and was sold to a man named John Wheatley. It was there with his family that she learned how to read and write and quickly picked up on it before writing her first poem in 1767. Her first published poem, On Mrs. Hussey and Coffin, became the start of her career in 1767. Later, in 1773, her most popular poem, On Being Brought from Africa to America, was published in a book of her poems. It talked about the struggles of being kidnapped as a child. Phillis was freed from slavery the following year in 1774 after John Wheatley died. And after this, she continued to write poems about current events that she supported, one being the triumphs of a man named General George Washington who was fighting for the American Revolution. He responded to her letter in 1775, thanking her for her kind words and clean line. Phillis Wheatley continued to write poetry, attempt to start a family, and continue her legacy until her death in 1784. Phillis Wheatley was born in 1753 in West Africa. Around the age of 8, she was kidnapped and put onto a slave ship to America. While on the ship, she witnessed the deaths and unfair treatment of many, which was something that she would go on to write about in the future. When she arrived in Boston, Massachusetts, she was quickly sold to a man named John Wheatley. The Wheatley family liked Phillis, and one of John's daughters taught her how to read and write. She was surprised by how quickly Phillis learned and took an even bigger liking to her after this. And Phillis continued to write her poetry until her first poem was published in 1767, which would be the start of her making history. Phillis believed that slavery should not exist. Her poems reflected this idea and explained the journey that she went through as a child because of slavery. Her style of poetry allowed readers to understand what she went through and feel empathy for her, and others that went through similar situations. The reason why Phillis was so influential was because she was not afraid to use her voice. At this time, no writer, let alone an African-American woman, would criticize the nation as she did. She wrote on various subjects and challenging topics that pushed the limits of what people knew about writing, and her work was quickly published. Her poetry book, Poems on Various Subjects, Religion and Moral, was the first book of poetry written by an African-American woman to be published in America. Within this book lies her most popular poem, On Being Brought from Africa to America. One quote from Phillis's poem, On Being Brought from Africa to America, is, "Some view our sable race with a scornful eye. Their color is a diabolic dye." Later in her career, Phillis would go on to write a letter to General George Washington, praising his work as a leader of the American Revolution. In this letter, a poem named To His Excellency General Washington credited his work. Later, Washington would respond to Wheatley, thanking her for her words and elegant lines. Phillis was recognized by many as a writer, but to be recognized by the man who'd become the first president of the United States just 4 years after her death speaks volumes. Phillis wrote, "Thy every action let the goddess shine, a crown, a mansion, and a throne that shine. With gold unfading, Washington, be thine." After Phillis was freed, she married another freed slave named John Peters. She continued to write, but tried to focus on having a family. Unfortunately, the 3 children that she had all passed away in early childhood. Phillis Wheatley died at the age of 31 in Boston, Massachusetts due to complications from childbirth in 1784. Phillis Wheatley was a revolutionary woman who paved the way for African American literature by writing powerful poetry. Today, she is remembered as a strong poet who was not afraid to use her voice. This is my works cited. Thank you.